And Cass over at Dr. Diff was kind enough to send their rear disc brake conversion. Slide it onto the rotor. And so there you have it. Our sway bar is completed, and now we have a complete rear disc brake conversion. Dang, it looks good. Check that out. Challenger trunk floor, as you remember, is totally welded in and ready to go. Only thing we want left is seaming up all these body panels here, making sure that they are watertight and good to go. So that's the next thing we're going to do. Actually going to seam seal all the body panels and get it ready for paint. So you can see here that what I've done is actually smoothed out what I had. Now, I know it doesn't look beautiful, but the thing is, one, the factory, if you had seen the stuff that they did, you'd be amazed and surprised at the fact that this looks way better, at least 100 times better. And two, it's really not how it looks, but how well it keeps water out, and that's the main goal here. We want to press all this in and make sure that it's really getting in between the seams to make sure that nothing is going to get inside it. Finally, the last piece of the trunk floor puzzle is to weld in our brand new trunk support, and this is what holds in our latch that actually latches on the deck lid when it closes. And this also came from Classic Industries. So we've got 3 spot welds up top, and then we'll burn in around the bottom edge. And what I did to figure out where this sat is I kind of wedged this up in here up under the lip, and then actually put the trunk lid on top of it and see where it latched. So I was able to kind of move it back and forth to figure out where it needed to really be. So now that I got it in place, I'm going to weld it in. And finally, the moment that we have all been waiting for is to finally get this truck bed liner that we have here on the trunk floor. I've been trying to get this thing ready to paint, and we have finally made it to that point. Cannot wait to see how this trunk floor looks all one color. So I gotta be honest with you guys. This car really does stress me out sometimes. If you keep watching, you'll find out why. It's almost to the point where I want to pull my hair out. And I really don't want to do that because I like my hair. I'd rather keep it. But thanks to our sponsor Keeps, we don't have to worry about that. Did you know that 2 out of 3 men are more than likely to experience some form of male pattern baldness before they're 35? I don't like those odds. Keeps has revolutionized the way that we prevent hair loss. No longer do you have to go to waiting rooms and wait for hours on end to get a prescription from a doctor. You go online and get the doctor directly talking to you, and they will give you a prescription that they will ship directly to your door. The sooner that you start acting on this hair loss prevention, the better. Fun fact, Keeps treatments are up to 90% effective at reducing and stopping further hair loss. So why would you want to wait any longer? If you want to prevent hair loss and support the channel at the same time, go down to the link below. It's keeps.com/Dylan McCool. Save 50% off your first order. That's KEEPS.com/Dylan McCool. Save 50% off your first order. See ya. Our first bit of new parts here comes courtesy of Phytech. And what this is is their in-tank solution for a high pressure system. And this is what you would use for their electronic fuel injection system. So you've got your pump side, and this is the side that actually goes towards the engine, and then you have your return system that comes back. So as you can see, all this is adjustable. You cut it to fit. So we'll go over all that process in depth. And here is your pump, and this all is in tank. It's all, you know, contained, self-contained into one unit. You have all your hardware, the sock, everything, all the gaskets you'll need to install this on your tank. So Tanks Inc. makes everything so much easier when it comes to actually installing that EFI fuel pump. And they also send this sending unit here for your fuel gauge. They have all the hardware necessary to make everything work, gaskets, and they even have this pretty neat little rollover vent. But let's say that this the car rolls over. Hear that? There's a check ball in here, keep fuel from coming out, but you can still vent the tube. Pretty neat stuff. So anyway, you got your fuel pump here, sending unit here, and there's baffles inside the tank to keep fuel around the pump. And that's why running a tank like this is a whole lot better. And this tank comes painted too, so it's going to keep it from rusting. And that's awesome. This tank just makes everything so much easier. It's a really good option for running a factory style look while maintaining that factory look, but also being able to have the modern usability and ease of an electric fuel pump with an in-tank system. It just keeps everything a whole lot simpler and a whole lot nicer looking. And once again, Classic Industries follows through with some great restoration products. Here we have a brand new filler neck, and to accompany the installation of that, we've got this new rubber O-ring that goes inside the fuel tank to keep any kind of fuel from getting out. Then we have this rubber boot that goes around the filler neck, and that keeps any kind of like fumes getting inside the trunk, and it just seals everything off properly. We have fuel tank straps back here, and then here we have a rubber insulator that goes on the top of the gas tank and sandwiches in between that and the trunk floor on the bottom side, keep any vibrations and rattling from happening. So thanks again, Classic Industries, for supporting us. So let's get to it. Let's install some gas tank. So step one tells us to measure the depth of the tank, and that comes out to right at 9¼ inches. So the main goal of this system is to actually make sure that once everything is installed, the sock and pump sit about 1/8 of an inch from the bottom of the tank. And we'll determine that by cutting our hoses and the support bracket on the pump assembly itself. So a few modifications are required to the pump assembly. First thing being that this support rod has to be cut to that exact length. And what you want to do is you want to take this foam gasket and add that into consideration whenever you're measuring your length. So what I did was actually take and measure 9¼ inches from wherever that foam gasket ends, and that's where I cut the bottom of this. And then on this return tube, it says in the directions to cut it roughly 1/4 inch away from the bottom, and then cut it at a 45-degree angle. So you can see right there, it is at a 45-degree angle, pretty much close enough. I didn't get my protractor out, sorry about that. But anyway, 9¼ inches here, and then 9 inches right here, and then we have a 45-degree angle, and then this is where our actual pickup side will go. And what we had to do was make sure, like I mentioned a second ago, is that this pump, the sock assembly, sits roughly 1/8 of an inch above the bottom of the tank. And that's what we pretty much have. You can see here that whenever we have the hose installed, we'll actually sit just slightly above the bottom of the tank, and that's where that blue line is. That's 1/8 of an inch right there. So that's the only modifications that I had to make. So just measure twice, cut once, and be sure that you do the right thing. It's a little nerve-wracking, but once you get everything set in stone, it's not too bad. Now the next step is to actually install our pump onto our pickup tube itself. That requires a heat gun and a hose clamp. Don't need a ton of heat, just enough to bend it. Then when we go in there, look at that. Perfect. That went easier than I thought it would. And with our pump zip tied to the actual support rod, we now have our completed fuel pump assembly. And you can see here, I went ahead and added that thick foam gasket. Now we're ready to install the entire assembly. And the last step here for pump insulation is to make sure that these rubber O-rings are actually installed before you put the pump on. Another good thing about the tank is that it actually has the threads already in there, so you don't have to use the nut on the back side that they provide with the kit. So whenever you thread these in, they're good to go. You don't have to actually do anything extra. You just have to make sure that it's got these little O-rings installed before you do it. So as you can see, there's basically a tub around the fuel pump itself. It's open on the bottom, but that just keeps fuel from being pulled away in maybe hard accelerations or hard stops, any kind of turns. Keeps it all right there up under the fuel pump. And you can see that there's these baffles right here, and again, that keeps fuel from sloshing around so much. And that's why this tank is superior to running a factory style with that extra pump. And it's not to say that it can't work, but this just works so much better, and it keeps all that fuel right there up under the pump to keep it cool and keep it from burning up. So our first step for the sending unit is to literally disassemble it. It needs to equal about half of what our tank depth is, and right now it is way too long. So we undid all of our screws, and we're taking out the middle adjustment bar. And then we'll screw this back in place to be adjusted further up here. So from the top of the base plate, we need to measure to the center of the pivot point for the sender, and that equals 4 3/4 inches. And the way I calculated that is I take the depth of the tank, which is 9.25, and then we divide that in half. That gives us 4.625, and then we add back 1/8 of an inch to account for the gasket. That gives us 4.75 inches that this thing needs to be from the top of the base plate to the center of this pivot point. So now we have to determine where our float will rest. And the thing is that we have to make sure that the top of the float, when it is maxed out, is actually 1/8 of an inch under our mounting surface. And that means because we have to compensate again for that gasket. So what I decided to do was use that straight edge. And all you do is take out that old little placement rod that was just sitting there and holding in place, and then run this through. And what I wanted to do was use this straight edge again. Make sure we run it all the way in and then max it out like so. You see how I have it hitting the very end? That means that this is basically where it'll sit when it's full. So then we'll run it in slowly until we touch that file, and that right there is where full will be. So we will lock that down in place because that is 1/8 of an inch up under the mounting surface of the sender. So now we can lock it in, cut the excess off, and we're done. And in goes the sender. With both of these installed, you can see that there is a vent here and also a vent here in the tank. And what they supplied me is a T for these vents. So what we'll do, we'll run some kind of combination. I'm not sure which way we'll go, but we'll have one vent going into here, this vent going into here, and this will actually run into our rollover vent, but we have to mount it up higher, as high as we can, at least up to where any kind of fuel will sit, even the filler neck. We want to make sure that it's mounted as pretty high, then at least above the tank is the main thing. Before we put in our tank, I wanted to wire up the ground system first. You can see all I've done is actually loop this ground for the sender over to the fuel tank pump, and then ran a wire of just a bunch of extra length, and then I'll run that to an actual ground. Now here you can see my vent system all completed and ready to go. So what I did, as you can see, there's the T that I just showed you. Ran one vent off of the pump, one off the tank. And now we have our Classic Industries mat. Oh, cool. Anyway, I taped this thing down just to make sure that it doesn't try to roll back, because it was rolled up in the package and it likes to curl up. So I just taped it down to keep it in place for the time being. But again, that one works for insulation from rubbing metal on metal, but it's also going to keep any of our power wires from making kind of grounds to the body itself. And one more thing that Classic Industries sent were these KYB gas adjust shocks. I really do like these shocks. I had a set on my Charger, and I've already got a set on the front of the Challenger. This will complete the rear. These ride great and provide a very firm feel, and they're really not that expensive, but they're not over the top, and they're not going to jar you loose when you're driving down the highway, but they will keep a firm ride planted down to the ground. So let's throw these on while we have access before we put the gas tank in. So just to apologize in advance, I did not film the rest of this tank going in because it ended up being a lot more involved, because I messed up how the tank straps were oriented. I actually put them in backwards. Didn't realize it until I was already like an hour in and wondering why they wouldn't fit. So turned them around and everything worked perfectly fine. So the thing that I had to do, the first step, I'll just tell you the process. Get your filler neck in, fitting it loose, don't tighten it up all the way. And once you have your grommet on for the filler neck and the tank itself, you'll slide that in and then let the filler neck hold the gas tank, and then put your straps in, because that helps a lot whenever you're trying to actually bolt the gas tank in the car, just to have something there to hold it. And if your valance isn't on already, leave it off. It makes things a lot easier when it comes to actually installing these things. You can see there's the bolts, there's the hardware right there. Everything looks good, it's all tight, ready to go. So the tank is in the car. Now I think it's about time we put on that new bumper that Classic Industries sent us. First step here is going to take these new bumper bolts that I bought and actually bolting bumper brackets onto the bumper. And these, you can see here, they're chrome on one end, and then they have this little square basically, and that's what locks into place in the bolt hole, and that keeps it still. That way all you have to do is just loosen the nut on the back when you're removing the bumper. But since it's such a tight fit when it's actually in the car, we're going to use these on the bumper brackets before we install it on the car. A little trick I like to do is take these bumper bolts and slide them up under the bumper, so that way the bumper will hold it in place, in case you're just doing this by yourself. This makes it a lot easier, keeps those bumpers sitting still. Now we just add our washers back. One washer, lock washer, and then the nut. There's our brackets, all on the bumper, ready to go in the car. Looks good. That looks awesome. I'm not gonna lie. This whole remove the filler panel and the bumper guards, man, it just totally changes the look of the car. It was way more aggressive, way more muscle car, and it fits the era way better than what it did have before. Now, it is not adjusted. They're just sitting in there with those two bolts that I put in there, and they're not even tight. They're just finger tight. Everything's just hanging out. I do need to adjust the bumper properly and get the gaps lined up right, but it gets you the idea of what the car is going to look like. And man, does it look so good. I mean, seriously. Man, that is insane. This looks like a totally different car. This is a side I can get used to. These bumpers. Wow. Honestly, that's all I can say. Classic Industries outdid themselves big time on how nice these bumpers look. Absolutely love the way that these things look on this car. Compared to the big bumper guards, game changer. I mean, look at that. This looks so much better. Now we got ultimate gasser stance, but once we get an engine in the car, be totally different. And we get the thing sitting low, get the ride height set where we want it. Dang, those bumpers look so good. And they're literally perfect. They still have the protective coating on it and get all of it clean, but really see the finish on that bumper. Seriously, just so much better. Just really cleans up the car all the way around. Still got to put the hood on it. I put the deck lid on just to kind of finish off the look and see how it'll kind of smooth everything out. I mean, these cars are so good with no spoiler, all these round body lines coming into the end, and everything just works. I mean, the way that this car just finishes off in the back, it's amazing. Man, looks so good. Honestly, I'm floored with the quality. Absolutely love the quality of these bumpers. The way that the car looks is just totally different. Changed everything about it. The brackets were easy to install. Everything was easy to adjust. All factory stuff, bolted right up. Once it was done, all I had to do was tighten it up, and there it was. So simple. And it changed the look of the car immensely. Just night and day difference. So thank you, Classic Industries, for sending these beautiful bumpers. I cannot stress enough how beautiful these things are and how good they look. So you really get an idea of how the car looks from the underside. We gotta remove these brake cables here and kind of hang them up somewhere safer, but I just installed them the way that they were. I have to relocate those, but other than that, everything is pretty much done in the back of the car. Now we can finally move to the front. You can see everything looks good. That Tanks Inc. fuel tank, Vitec fuel pump, all installed nicely. As long as you install your tank straps the right way around, you have no issue. It really took no time at all once I figured out what I was doing wrong. And that's why I didn't film any of it, because I was getting mad. But hey, everything is done. Dr. Diff, brakes, axles, Tanks Inc. fuel tank, Classic Industries filler net, grommet, insulator pad, everything is done and ready to go for the car to hook up to a fuel system. So that's going to be the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below. If you have a question for me, feel free to leave a comment. Order your t-shirts and your stickers. And don't forget to submit your project on the Facebook page. And a big thanks to Vitec, Tanks Inc. and Classic Industries for supplying all the parts that you saw today. It's been a really big help and really pushed the Challenger along a lot further. The next part of the process will either be, we'll finish up tearing up the interior because we have to get everything out of the way. We've got a painless harness, so that's going to be up in the next few videos. We've got to finish up cleaning a few things up in the engine bay. I got a little rust spots I want to take care of before we drop our engine in. And then at that point, we can really start working on the finer details and get this car on the road finally. So thank you for being patient with me. I appreciate all of you guys watching it, and hopefully you stick around to see this car finally come to fruition and actually be a running and driving car once more. I really appreciate everything you guys have done for me. We hit 300,000 subscribers, and that's amazing. So thank you, every one of you, every single one of you. Again, if it was not for you, none of this would be possible. So huge thanks, and just the deepest sense of gratitude for the things that you guys have done for me. It's honestly changed my life, and I love every bit of it, and without you, none of this would be possible. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.